to enjoy our next presenter is Amy Ellis from PHS. And yeah, Amy, fantastic to have you here. I will step aside and let you share screen and share your story. Thank you.
Thanks, Pete. And as the next presenter, I can honestly say that countdown was terrifying. So thank you for that. Literally counting down to when I had to do this. So my name is Amy. I'm the head of internal comms at PHS Group. We launched Yammer in December of last year. So we're at our 1 year anniversary. So I'm just going to kind of take everyone through what this first year has been like for us. So bear with, here's my first challenge of the day. Okay, can you guys see this?
Looking good, yeah, can see it.
Cool. So first of all, I thought I would take you through a little bit about our company, a little bit about what our employees are like, so you can understand the type of company we've introduced Yammer into. So as I said, I work for PHS Group. PHS are the leading hygiene services provider in the UK, Ireland and Spain. So we provide washroom, floor care, healthcare, and a range of specialist services. And people always go, oh, I don't know who you are. And then they see our logo and they go, yeah, the little yellow lozenge. So basically, if you've ever been in a public toilet, particularly in the UK, Ireland and Spain, you have seen the PHS logo. So our hygiene business provides and empties like sanitary bins, nappy bins, soap dispensers, hand dryers, all the really sexy stuff that you get in a public toilet. So the average person that works at PHS looks like this. So he's male, he's age 44, he's been with us just over 6 years, and he's out in a van all day. So this is a particularly hard demographic to communicate to anyway, especially with digital tools. And this was kind of the employee we were aiming to get. So next year, PHS are 60 years old. And to be honest, their channel mix massively reflected that. So there was no working from home, no Teams, no Zoom, like not even a sniff of Skype. And actually there was no desire to communicate digitally either. And then the pandemic hit. And like lots of companies, they suddenly had to change everything. And it had a really big impact on PHS and how they communicated. So traditionally, they relied on posters, word of mouth, they had daily meetings with managers, and suddenly they had to adopt new ways of working. So they rolled out Microsoft Teams overnight in March 2020, and they've been working flexibly and successfully ever since. In January 2021, they asked me to join as the head of internal comms. So that's me out with the man in the van. That is Arvin, one of our longest serving employees, showing me the ropes. And it was very clear to me after chatting with people that worked there and after doing a channel audit of my own, that there were actually a lot of broadcast channels at PHS and not enough collaboration channels. But people were adapting to change well. There was clear momentum behind using more digital tools, and I could immediately see the gap for some sort of kind of social media platform. And I knew that I felt that was the right thing to do, but actually I wanted to go to my board with some data and some analytics to say, well, this is what our people want. So I asked them, what do you think of PHS? What do you think of our communication? And generally they were very positive. So we had an 82% response rate, and we had 75% positive employee engagement. And our people generally told us they were really proud to work at PHS, but we needed to work on making people feel valued, particularly by leadership, and to have better two-way communications. So as a business, these became our objectives, and therefore they became our comms objectives as well. And these were better leadership engagement, so specifically seeing more of them and having direct conversations, being better at knowledge sharing, so actually ensuring people knew how to find out what was going on, and being part of the conversation. So having an inclusive community to create cross-business relationships and bring back some of the fun that people felt they were missing because they were now kind of spread out across the country. So with that in mind, we made the decision that Yammer would be a good choice for us. So how did I start? So before I even started anything, I actually reached out to my external LinkedIn network. And I got hooked up with an awesome communicator who I believe now works for Swoop, Gemma Saint. So Gemma and I have been friends now for about a year, and Gemma helped me with my initial thinking around Yammer. And Gemma actually recommended that I bring someone into the team who was to manage the setup and the launch of Yammer, and who would really be the driving force behind the success of it. So we hired James. When James joined the team, we then reached out to our IT team and we formed a project team. And what this did was it helped us to really ensure we had all the right policies and procedures in place, as well as all the right permissions across the company. So if we told people they were going to find it in Teams, they would find it in Teams. If we had a URL, we knew it was whitelisted for everybody, and they were really, really helpful for us. And finally, we looked across our business for our champions. Who are our comms champions? And they were already there. They were people who were passionate about engagement. They were already doing comms in their own areas. And they became our kind of eyes, ears, mouths, and our biggest advocates for Yammer, really. So we gave them early access, and they helped us with a lot of our early decision making. And I think what I really want to say with that is that I didn't do this alone. So it was a huge team effort. And it continues to be every day to continue to make Yammer a success at PHS. So how do we do it? So as I said, we launched in December. So we launched with a Christmas Advent calendar that we called the Advent of Yammer. And following Gemma's recommendation, we shared snippets of little bits of Yammer every day in the lead up to launch, and it got people a little bit excited. We shared it via email and through Teams because they were the channels that people were using at the time. And then when Yammer launched, we moved everything completely onto Yammer and had a completely Yammer focused campaign. So within about 3 months, we had a third of PHS using it every day. It wasn't an initial objective, but readership did increase. But most importantly for me, what we did was give people a voice. As we can see very quickly, and you can see the stat there, that 96% of content was being posted by colleagues outside of internal comms. So yes, we were there, we were kind of needling away, but people were generating their own content and were able to do that for the very first time ever. So my next step was actually to bring in Swoop. What I recognised quite early was that I could get my own data on how many people were using it. I could measure the number of reactions and comments compared to when we posted on the intranet. But Swoop could actually help me measure what those initial objectives were. So these objectives, so the leadership engagement, the knowledge sharing, and being part of the conversation. And I'm just going to run through very quickly the reports that we have found most useful in measuring these kind of objectives. So these are the ones that we're using. So for better leadership engagement, we massively use our influential people report. So you can see the 2 reports on the right there. The one to the left is influential people in the whole company. Matthew Braben is our CEO, and he's just behind me and James at the moment, but I would like to see him overtake us in time, and for us to drop out of this top 10. And the other one is our hygiene operations department, which is our biggest department. And Chris Rowe is the director of that department, and Catherine Blackwell, who sits at number 1, is his comms champion. So we can see that these people are having better leadership engagement. For the knowledge sharing, we use the most engaging posts tool, which the CEO and the head of showed you earlier, but I'll show you again in a minute how we use that. And then for two-way communication, we rely on this two-way relationships report and the response rate report. And it shows us that our people are more interactive across this platform than, again, they've ever been. And we didn't keep all this data to ourselves. We've actually rolled out Swoop across PHS. So our leadership have access to it, our comms champions have access to it, and our wellbeing coordinators have access to it. And these are all people that understand the role that Swoop can play, and it allows us to coach them in becoming better communicators themselves. And I've got an example of this for you. So this is Claire. Claire is our commercial director. And this is a post that Claire put out in January. And this is the post that Claire put out in August. So they look like two very similar posts, but they performed very differently. And I'll just break that down on the next slide. So in the August post, Claire posted an all company rather than just to a small community like she had done before. She asked a question, she included a photo, and she replied to all of the comments that came in as a result of her question. And her post went from being seen by 61 people to 919 people, had 10 reactions to 58 reactions, and 0 comments to over 50. And we were able to do this with Claire because we could show her using Swoop what good looked like. What were people engaging with using this tool? The impact of attachments report. You know, she had access to this, but we could sit down and say to her, look, these are the things that are performing and this is why. And it's coached her to be a better communicator all by herself. So she obviously posted that second picture from her garden. That's where she's doing it. And she's taking advice and advantage of all of the data that we have available to us. So where are we now? So we've just run our 2022 engagement survey. We had an 84% response rate this time, which is up from 82. And our engagement has increased from 75% to 80%. Now, every single question in our survey around communication improved. And in fact, every single question around leadership improved as well. So we know Yammer has made a difference. We now have about 70% of people at PHS on Yammer every month. Only about 35% of these are active. So we know we have a way to go, but for us as a team, and Pete will testament to this, we're always saying, well, what can we do next? Where are we going next? So that is what we are looking at now, is what do we do to make 2023 an even better year for us? So for me, we've developed a real Yammer-powered communication culture, which I'm really proud of. And we've made the decision to simplify our channel mix even further. So currently, we only regularly communicate to people from the business via Yammer or via email. So we do have quarterly webinars as well, so people can hear from our leadership, but they are our 2 core communication channels. And what that simplification has meant is that our people know where to find information quickly and easily, and that's especially true for those on the move. So we're now in the process of removing our intranet. So since the advent of Yammer, it just does not get used like it used to. It's no longer a news channel, and instead for us, we will just be using it as a SharePoint site where we keep our policies, our documents, and our useful links. But the window to get there is still going to be through Yammer. In addition, as I said, we're about to hit our 1-year Yammer anniversary, and we're using that as an opportunity to ask our people, what do they love? What do they hate? What do they like? What would they like to see more of? What would they like to see less of? And we're asking this in an email rather than on Yammer, because we want to get feedback from people that aren't using it so we can understand that a little bit better as well. So that'll be happening in the next week or so keep you posted how that goes. But we know that Yammer has positively influenced the channel mix and the communication at PHS so far. So this is my last slide. What I've taken you through is a very whistle-stop tour of our first year. But what I want to point out is that it wasn't all perfect. Yes, we've come out with a really great result after year 1, but we absolutely had challenges. And these are the things that if I were to do it again, I would do the same, and the things that I would do differently. So I'll just talk through those very quickly. So I would hire James again. He's on the call, so he's probably really pleased to hear that. But Gemma was absolutely right. Having someone who owned the channel, loved it, was active, answers questions, connects people, it was just absolutely invaluable. And it's not something I could have done alongside my day job. I would have brought in Swoop again, because it's allowed us to measure the business objectives. And we've become a much more strategic function as a result. Our board and our leadership are no longer looking to us to just push out an email. They're actually listening to what we're talking about. We have a seat at that table because we can, you know, put data into their business objectives, which is something that obviously they're aiming towards. So our objectives is, I would say, be really clear on them, because it does help drive decision making. So we wanted Yammer to be a really open and inclusive space. So we made decisions very early that we only have open communities. We have no closed communities in Yammer at all. And we also made the decision not to pre-populate any communities either. We wanted people to feel like it was relevant and for them to choose what they wanted to see. And the only exceptions with that is the news channel and the channel that holds all the information around our EAP. Other than that, people are free to choose what they want to opt in of rather than opting out of. So the comms champions. So absolutely love this. I support this as a concept. We absolutely could have done more, and I'll come on to that in a second. The leadership engagement was such an important piece. So we spent months in the lead up to launching Yammer going through the what ifs. What if this happens? Or what if this person does this? Or what if they say that? Spoiler alert, no one has actually done that. But all of that months of hard work has been it was so valuable, because when Yammer was ready, they were ready. So they were on there on day one. They had no worries about it. And that has allowed us to give permission to others. If the HR director is talking about the World Cup last night, other people feel like they can get involved in that conversation. So they really have allowed people to know this is something that they're allowed to do in work time, and it doesn't have to be just about work stuff. I would collaborate with IT again. They were our allies and not our barriers in this. And they wanted it to work just as much as we did. And they're still really helpful to us. They set up a lot of reports where if people use a naughty word, you know, us getting notified of it, or what happens if someone reports a post. And their kind of service desk is available a lot quicker than we are. So they're still actively involved in kind of the day-to-day of Yammer as well. And I would use any data that you have to align what people are telling you and where Yammer can fill the gap. So it's not just about what you can see as a comms team as an opportunity, it's what your people are saying. And I honestly believe it's the reason we've been so successful is our people wanted this. They just didn't know they did. They didn't know they did. They were telling us all the things they wanted, and it was our job to fill the gap, but they wanted this. And then the things that I could have done differently. So I would have engaged a lot earlier with our middle management, particularly those managing our drivers. So we've done a piece of work around who currently isn't using Yammer. And in our hygiene operations area, 75% are using it, but the 25% that aren't are drivers, and they're in the older age category, so they're kind of 55 plus. And so now we're working with their managers who see them at least once a week to help them engage with Yammer, so they can sit down with them and say, oh, have you seen Yammer? Let me help you get it onto your phone. Let me help you show you how you can use it and what you can find on there. And we're playing catch up with that a little bit now, and I wish we'd done it earlier. The comms champions, so as I said, I love the concept, but I believe we could have done a lot more. I feel like we were focused on what we needed from them to be successful, as opposed to what we could have done with them and for them. So I think we could have really made them a stronger network and a stronger tribe where they could have learned from each other and shared ideas. And I would have done that if we'd done it differently. And finally, and I think the Danfoss guys talked about this, is have preloaded content, because we didn't do this. And on day one, our champions were really good at going in and having a look at what was on there, but there wasn't an awful lot of stuff to look at. So it almost felt like a little bit of an anticlimax on day one. So yeah, we just shoved in some competitions quickly. But yeah, that's something again that I would have done a little bit differently if I'd had my time again. So that's it from my story. Obviously, I know there's probably some questions. James is also on the call, so if there are any questions specifically around communities, I'm happy for James to answer those as well. I think we're about on time, Pete. Thank you.
Brilliant. You've nailed it, Amy. That is fantastic. We've had a bunch of questions, lots of comments, and I saw lots of emojis flying around while you were talking. So really appreciate you sharing your experience and some amazing results that you've had. I'll start with a few questions from the Q&A. The first one I wanted to pick out is interesting. from Lisa, who is in Germany, who says, what are your suggestions to motivate colleagues to engage more on Yammer? In Germany, we have the problem that they can't see the added value and are still very reserved. What do you do to inspire and motivate colleagues to get involved?
Yeah, it's a great question. So we run a lot of Yammer only campaigns. So we almost want to make people have a bit of FOMO of, well, what am I missing out on? So we never, what I will say is never underestimate the power of still using something like email when you're still really early in your Yammer journey. So very rarely do we send out an email that doesn't have some sort of link to something in Yammer to kind of get people to click through and get on there and actually just have a look. So for us, the motivation is just telling people what's going on there and what they're missing out on, and that is working in terms of getting people on there. We've also done a few other tricky things. So we moved the link where people book holiday and see their pay slips off our intranet and onto Yammer. So they can only access that now if they go onto Yammer. So we just try out a few things like this. And that's why I love this community, because I'm sure there's so many things we haven't tried. And something that I am really proud of is that we're always happy to try anything and give anything a go. And our leadership are behind that. So in terms of motivation, what we have used so far is more the FOMO. So rather than it being the stick, it's the carrot of what you're missing out on. And we run a lot of competitions. We run a lot of questions that we ask people, what do you think about this, or polls on that. So our the company that owns us is a company in South Africa, and they recently asked our people, well, we've got a new engagement app, what could we name it? So we ran the poll on Yammer. So giving people the opportunity to get involved on those things on that platform is what it seems to kind of get people to go on there a little bit more.
Yeah, cool. I had a question that I selfishly want to ask, but it did get a few likes in there. You mentioned your average employee is this man in a van. How much training did you need to give them to get them across how to use Yammer, if any at all?
So we never sat down with them all individually, and I think, as I said, that's the bit that we missed. I think that we should have done more, and we could have done more, but as a team, it is only me and James, so we are a very small team trying to do this. So James did a lot of work. I'm very blessed to have James. James used to be a cameraman at the BBC, so he's very good with video. But we made a lot of videos for people to watch. And we've done a lot of lives, like team lives. James is always really happy to jump onto calls on one-on-ones. He attends team meetings. So we have done a lot of training in that respect. And we didn't do a lot of it up front. We let people make their own way to Yammer. And as they've had questions, as they've gone along, we have done that. We did train the comms champions, and we said to them, you know, you guys can now go and, you know, if people have specific questions, help us out a little bit. But yeah, we did a lot on video. We did a lot of recorded stuff. We also did stuff live so people could ask us questions. But we didn't have a set way of how we were going to do it, because PHS have never, ever, ever had a tool like this in their lives. We didn't know how this was going to be adopted. So we kind of just wanted to see it play out and see what would happen and what people would think. And we've adapted our kind of comms strategy as we've been going along, which so far has proved to be the best way to do it, I think, for us.
I think having sort of been with you on a lot of that journey and catching up with you over the months, I think it is worth remarking on your team, yourself and James, really have that mindset of adaptability and discovery. And so it's been really cool working with you, seeing how you're using the data, getting the insights, trying stuff, learning, and then adapting. So I just want to kind of give you a big thumbs up from me. I work with lots of organizations, and you shouldn't have favorites, but I think PHS is up there as one of mine. Another question, we've got a few more minutes. I do want to ask this question. It's come up from a couple of people around sort of saying, could you please elaborate on how you see Yammer replacing your intranet? And someone else was saying they're wondering why you're not embedding Yammer in the intranet rather than keeping them separate. So a little more on that intranet piece and how you see that working would be great.
Yeah, absolutely. So the intranet of PHS is about 7 years old, and it's something that I inherited when I got there. And I'll be honest, it was a mess. It's never really been reviewed in those 7 years. It was very hard to look at anything on there. The search function was useless. And we could see from the analytics in the background that it wasn't just us that thought this. People weren't really using it anyway. And the only reason news was being posted on there was because there was nowhere else for it to go. So we didn't want to make the decision very early on to get rid of the intranet. We wanted to make sure that Yammer was going to be a success first. And what it has shown is even more now, as Yammer usage is increasing, the use of the intranet is going down and down and down. So we are not replacing, I know it sounds like dramatic, we're replacing our intranet, but we're not replacing a tool that is actively being used by majority of people. We're replacing a tool that actually isn't fit for purpose anymore. It isn't a news channel. People don't need to use it like that. If we had a successful intranet, maybe our strategy on that would have been different. But what we had was somewhere that people thought they could find news, but it was too difficult to find news and people weren't using it effectively. And as I said, the analytics in the background told us that like 0.1% of users were a mobile user. When you consider the majority of our guys are a mobile user out on the road, they weren't using it. So that's why we didn't embed Yammer into it properly. It's why that we aren't looking at keeping it as it currently is. It's not fit for purpose for us anymore. But I wouldn't have been able to make that decision a year ago because I didn't have anything to replace it with. Now we've got something that is being able to replace it with, that is working, that leadership are behind. It makes the most sense to put our time and effort into that than any more time and effort and money into replacing an intranet that just isn't being used.
No, fascinating, really, really interesting. I respect again your experimental nature. You're pushing boundaries. I'm also thinking, James got mentioned in the chat a couple of times. Your pay rise conversation after all the praise you're getting today. There's another angle. The cost of the reduced cost of managing an intranet. You know, you can put a money value to that, right? And apply that. So, but look, it's just brilliant to hear. You know, most people, let's be fair, when they're washing their hands in a public restroom and seeing the PHS logo, they wouldn't necessarily think this is a super innovative organization that's breaking boundaries as far as internal communications, digital communications goes. But I think you've shown don't judge until you know the story. So it's really cool to hear the fantastic work you're doing at PHS. And yeah, I look forward to seeing where it goes next. I think it'd be fascinating. We're launching Swoop for SharePoint, as you know, and maybe in a year's time we do a SharePoint festival, and you can come and tell the story of how you don't have an intranet and what that looks like. So it might be an interesting angle. But look, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your story. There are more questions in the Q&A section. If anybody, we have 1 minute left. If anybody has a burning desire to come off mute and ask a question of Amy or James, you have 1 minute to do just that. I will open the floor now.
That's a shame, isn't it? I think go back on mute and off camera.
yeah, it's a scary thing when you've got this many people on a call to jump off mute. But look, yeah, thanks again both, and really appreciate your time and your sharing. I think a lot of people will have taken a lot away from your presentation, so thank you.
Yeah, and we're happy to be contacted if anyone wants to. So obviously, like, just find us on LinkedIn, and yeah, happy to have those conversations. We wouldn't be where we were if Gemma hadn't offered to do that for me, so we're always happy to share the love. Lovely. Thank you for having us, guys. Cheers.
Thank you so much.